The member for North Vancouver Lonsdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to speak in support of the Minister's budget update. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations upon whose land we are able to hold these proceedings today. I would also like to take a moment to thank the people of North Vancouver Lonsdale for choosing me to serve them as their MLA. It is a riding that exists on the traditional territories of the Squamish and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and a riding that has once again put their faith into an NDP candidate since former MLA David Schreck was elected in 1991. And my commitment to the people of North Vancouver Lonsdale is that I will work hard for them every day so that I might one day be worthy of the honor that they have bestowed upon me. Without going into a long list of names, I want to thank my team, my volunteers, my supporters, and my family for believing in me and for giving so much of themselves so that we might succeed together. It is because of all of you that our new government is able to offer all of the changes that are represented by this budget update. In particular, I would like to acknowledge my patient and loving partner, my talented and dedicated sister, and my fierce and loyal mother for being with me through what has been one of the most challenging endeavors I have attempted in my life so far. I would like to congratulate all of the members who have joined us on the Legislative Assembly, those who have been re-elected for their second, third, fourth term or more, and those who, like me, will be serving their first term. Finally, I would like to thank the former BC Liberal member, Ms. Naomi Yamamoto, for her 8 years of service to the people of North Vancouver Lonsdale, and for running what I believe was a very honourable campaign. Madam Speaker, I am the Canadian-born daughter of two Taiwanese immigrants, my father, an engineer, my mother, an accountant, both small business owners, and both worked extremely hard in their businesses in order to give me and my sister a middle-class upbringing. And they instilled in me the value of working hard. And it's interesting to know that there was a time when hardworking families could actually provide middle-class upbringings for their children. Nowadays, families work very, very hard to just be able to pay the bills, let alone own a house, pay for swim lessons for their children, or save for retirement. Small businesses like those my parents ran drive the local economy in BC, and they deserve to be supported. By phasing out PST for electricity for businesses and cutting the small business tax rate from 2.5% to 2%, we are helping hardworking small business owners like my parents succeed. Prior to my election, I sat down with the CEO of the North Vancouver Chamber of Commerce to talk with him about the concerns facing businesses in North Vancouver. At the time, we had already committed to gradually and predictably increasing minimum wage to $15 per hour, and I asked him if this might draw the ire from businesses the way that so many members opposite have suggested. His response to me that day was that the most urgent and significant challenges facing businesses on the North Shore was affordability. That is, of housing for their employees and affordability of lease rates for their storefronts. It was also about transportation for their employees and childcare for their employees. Businesses are struggling to hire enough people to keep their businesses functioning because their employees cannot afford to live in North Vancouver anymore. And those that choose to commute to work from off of the North Shore cannot get to work on time because of the lack of public transit services and the extreme congestion on the roads. They have had brilliant, talented women leave for maternity leave with the full intention of returning to work and then become unable to return because they were unable to find childcare. And so he said to me, the issue of minimum wage and any potential disagreements that do exist there pale in comparison next to those challenges. In fact, I have heard from many small businesses who have said that they would gladly pay higher wages if it meant that they would be able to support and retain their employees for longer without losing their competitive edge, and that they would fully support the establishment of the Fair Wages Commission. And this budget does that and more to support businesses by creating the conditions that allow them to succeed, by providing childcare for their employees so that they can afford to come back to work, by improving affordability so that their employees are able to live closer to where they work, and to invest in transit so that their employees can get to work. We will be increasing corporate tax rate by 1% and increasing taxes for those individuals earning in excess of $150,000 a year, and I fully support these measures. I will admit, shortly after the minister's budget update speech, I received a text message communication from a community member. "Good job on the tax increase," the text read. It was shortly followed by another text message. "No, I'm not being sarcastic. I really do think the tax increase is a good idea." He continued to clarify his position, saying, and I quote, "As someone who from time to time earns more than $150,000 a year, I can honestly tell you that I am not going to notice the change. And quite frankly, the things that aggravate me and my family every day will benefit far more from my tax dollars than what I can do with those dollars on my own." He told me that what he was concerned about were seismic upgrades for his kids' schools, helping those living with drug addiction and providing housing for the homeless so that playgrounds can go back to being playgrounds rather than necessary shelters for those with nowhere else to go. He told me he wants the housing market to be managed so that one day he and his wife could actually own a larger home for their growing family. And he said that he wanted more public transportation spending so that he and his family can continue to help the environment by living a car-free life. In short, he wants conditions to improve for everyone to be lifted up, because he knows that for someone earning his income level, that's actually what will help his family most. I believe that more young professionals understand this than those members opposite might think. Madam Speaker, I am reminded of a conversation that I had during the election this year. I had knocked on the door of some community members to ask about the issues that mattered to them, and at this one home, a husband and wife had opened the door. In the woman's arms, a small child, not 2 years old. I asked them how they felt about the upcoming election. "Well," the husband began, "I suppose what's most important to me is the economy. And the economy is doing pretty well, I hear. And they say that the province has a large surplus, so I guess the BC Liberals know what they're doing." But the wife beside him scoffed loudly. "If the economy is doing so well," she said, "why are we working so hard to make ends meet? Why can't my sister find secure housing? Why can't we afford to pay childcare? Why can't my mother receive the care that she needs? Why can't we save any money for retirement? And when I take my child to the doctor, why does it take an hour to catch a bus? It seems to me like the economy isn't worth anything to our family if that economy isn't actually working for us." Now, I'm paraphrasing, of course, as she used much more colorful language than Madam Speaker would allow here in these chambers today. But suffice it to say, without too many more words from me, at the end of my visit, both members of the household agreed that they would be taking an NDP lawn sign. You see, Madam Speaker, British Columbians can see through the rhetoric that contradicts their own lived experiences. Under the previous government, while the province enjoyed a surplus, it was the people of British Columbia who paid for it in their day-to-day lives, and they paid dearly. The official opposition may criticize the proposed spending in our budget update, but by doing so, they confirm exactly how little they have learned from the experience that has led them to that side of the House. A government serves people, and when a government delivers services, they deliver them to real people. People who live, people who laugh, people who cry, who suffer, yell out in pain, who love and are loved. This new government understands that, and we have put forward a budget that demonstrates that understanding. When my constituents speak with me, the three most common issues that come up are housing affordability, public transportation, and childcare. 3 issues that are all intricately tied to affordable living here in BC, and I am pleased to know that our government takes all 3 matters seriously. Out on the North Shore, traffic congestion has been out of control and long ignored by the previous government. They had nearly 16 years to make the investments we needed to keep people moving, and yet, for the most part, nothing. I want to acknowledge the member from North Vancouver Seymour, who was able to fight through 5 BC Liberal transportation ministers over the last 8 years to finally bring attention to the North Shore with the Highway 1 Lower Lynn corridor improvements. And I'm pleased to know that this new government is committing to continuing with those improvements. But after 16 years of neglect, we also know that those measures alone will not be enough. That's why this government's commitment to support the 10-year Mayor's Transportation Plan is critical. It will mean more buses on the roads, more handy-dart services for those with mobility challenges, increased frequency of the C-bus for commuters, and the addition of B-lines across the North Shore to cut through the congestion. City planners and transportation engineers have known this for years. You cannot build your way out of urban congestion with more lanes and more bridges. The residents of North Vancouver Lonsdale know that public transportation is our way out of the mess the previous government allowed us to get into. And I am pleased to know that this government has reiterated their commitment in the throne speech to work collaboratively with local mayors and our partners in the federal government to deliver better transit options for people. I support the government's commitment to move forward with new childcare investments that will allow us to support more than 4,000 new childcare spaces. I also know that this is just the beginning of our commitments to bring in accessible and affordable childcare to British Columbia. And that's good news for my constituency, because North Vancouver Lonsdale has a major childcare crisis. In North Vancouver, we have one of the highest rates of families led by single parents in the province. The need for childcare in those families is absolutely critical. I remember meeting a single mother of 3 on the doorsteps. She shared with me that her childcare expenses had cost her $42,000 last year. She pays $42,000 a year so that she can go to work and support her family without worrying about the safety of her children. On top of that, every year her family's rent continues to rise, but her salary stays the same. Through tears, she told me that she didn't know how much longer she could make it work. Childcare is, of course, critical for those families led by dual parents as well. And over, I've heard of parents being unable to find affordable childcare, have had to choose between providing a second income to a family that's already under huge financial burden or providing safe, reliable childcare for their child. It is a choice that no parent should have to make. But there are no fair choices when a government that is meant to help people fails to do their duty. This is why I was the first MLA out of the gates to speak with the member for Burnaby Lougheed, just minutes after her appointment as Minister of State for Childcare, to tell her about the North Shore and how the North Shore has a serious childcare problem. Don't forget about the North Shore, I implored her. A few short weeks later, the minister was meeting with North Shore not-for-profit childcare providers, District of North Vancouver, City of North Vancouver, and District of West Vancouver municipal planning representatives in the area of childcare, and other North Shore childcare stakeholders to learn about the challenges that we face. This is how I know that the commitments being put forward by the budget update now are only just the beginning of what will be a comprehensive plan to put the childcare crisis to bed. This is a key aspect of improving affordability in this province, and it means more money for parents to ensure that happy, healthy children grow up in happy, healthy families, which leads to happier, healthier communities. Speaking of affordability, I know that housing is top of mind for so many people in North Vancouver. 16 years of neglect has allowed our real estate market to get out of control, our rental rates to skyrocket, waiting lists on our subsidized housing stock run miles long. This issue has generally left hardworking individuals and families behind. It is a huge mess, Mr. Speaker. And now we have a government made up of people who are ready to work for people. It also means that we now have a government that is actually interested in cleaning up that mess. We'll start by working on a comprehensive strategy to improve housing affordability by closing speculation loopholes, reducing tax fraud and money laundering in the BC real estate. And while we are doing that, we'll be injecting more funds into the residential tenancy branch so that they can address the backlog of cases that have held so many renters captive. The additional $500 million for housing has not come a moment too soon. Let's get started today on those 1,700 additional units of affordable rental housing and 2,000 units of modular supportive housing for people who are homeless. Every week, I have people come into my office who have been hurt by the failures of the previous government in this regard. There are simply too many stories to share. The examples are endless. From renters being slapped with 40% rent increases using clauses introduced by the previous government, to families falling victim to fixed lease loopholes that the previous government failed to close. It's enough to consider our housing situation in a state of emergency. The new government spending proposals in this budget update are absolutely urgent and absolutely necessary. It is also urgent and necessary for us to commit to fighting poverty, which is why this budget includes the initial funding required to develop a comprehensive poverty reduction strategy and a $100 per month increase to disability assistance and income assistance rates. I remember the day this announcement was made. I had spoken with a constituent who I knew was struggling. She is one of the sweetest women you will ever meet, and she lives on disability assistance. You can often see her walking down the street of Lonsdale with her cane, usually traveling between medical appointments. Although she is extremely shy, she never fails to give a passerby a friendly greeting and a smile. I told her that day that her disability assistance checks would go up by $100 a month as of September 20th. I also admitted to her that I knew it really wasn't enough to make her life easy. And I went on to tell her that we would be launching the development of a comprehensive poverty reduction strategy. But she interrupted me before I could finish. "Because of you," she said, "I'll be able to buy food. It is more than I have had for a very, very long time." I do not take the positive impact that we have had on the lives of people like her for granted. I know that this government will work hard every day to continue to make her life better. After people, the environment is our greatest and most important asset, and it must be defended. Full stop. You see, I believe that the debate over whether pipelines are better or worse than rail cars, are better or worse than tankers for transporting whatever substance it is that we are arguing about today, and whether an environmentally disastrous project produces 50 full-time jobs or 100 temporary jobs, that debate pales in comparison to the question that is, what kind of future do we want for our children? What kind of world do we need to leave our grandchildren? What kind of lives do they need to be able to have the opportunity to lead? And do we want them to have access to clean drinking water, clean air, healthy agriculture? We must be able to see the forest from the trees. It is absolutely right for BC to take serious and decisive steps to protect the environment and meet our climate change goals. And that is why I fully support the increase to the carbon tax and the end to the revenue-neutral nature of the tax so that families can be supported and so that investments can be made in green initiatives that will give us a fighting chance at saving this planet. I look forward to the additional climate action measures that will come in the weeks and months ahead as we work with our colleagues in the Green Caucus and the official opposition. We must support this budget. We must support this budget because British Columbians deserve better than what they received under the previous government. We must support this budget because climate change and poverty, opioid overdoses, homelessness, and hopelessness are real issues. And it should not be a question of whether or not we can afford to resolve them, but a question of whether we as a society can afford not to. From regulations that manage climate change and the environment to the distribution of social funding and poverty reduction, governments provide the fundamental framework within which companies operate and within which people live, work, succeed, suffer, or die. It is a heavy burden, and there are never easy answers, but I am optimistic because I know that the decisions and choices that this government has made are informed by learning from the mistakes of the previous government. These are priorities that put people first, not profits. And these are choices that help the many, not the very few at the top. I would like to leave my colleagues in this room with one final thought, and that is that despite all of the challenges we face in our great province today, despite all of the disagreements we have had and will have in the future, despite the swath of carpet between our desks, between this side of the House and that side of the House, that perhaps represents a greater divide than what truly exists in our hearts, I believe that we can overcome our differences and work together to build a better BC. And a great man, who most, if not all of us, are familiar with already, who also believed this all to be true, told us this before his death. My friends, love is better than anger. Hope is better than fear. Optimism is better than despair. So let us be loving, hopeful, and optimistic, and we will change the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.